Blog Talk Radio.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Julie.
Huh?
Julie.
Huh? Guess what day it is?
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is?
Anybody? Anybody?
Mike.
Huh?
What day is it, Mike?
Huh? Woo-hoo!
Leslie, guess what today is? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Hump day!
It's hump day.
Hump day!
Then to look for welcome you to the Tuesday edition of the Batchelor Pad here on blogtalkradio.com and Batchelor Pad Radio Network. Tony McLean sitting in for LA Batchelor. Of course, you can catch us here every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday here on the Batchelor Pad Network at 7 p.m. Listen to every podcast on the BatchelorPadNetwork.com or at TuneIn.com. And, of course, you can also follow us on social media at Pad Nation, at Facebook, or Pad Nation 2 at Twitter.com. Coming up on the program, we'll be speaking with HBCU author and historian Fred Whitted, talking about a very important subject in regards to the future of HBCUs and of their students, something that if you're an HBCU grad or a current student, you might want to be interested in checking it out. And in our last half hour, we'll be talking a little baseball with Tom Donaldson, of course, him from the Donaldson Files. You just heard him here on the network. And we'll be talking other sports as well. Just getting started here on the Batchelor Pad. And, of course, the number to reach us, 646-929-0130. And we're about to bring in our first guest. Of course, he is the founder and the president of the Black Heritage Review Network. He is Dr. Fred Whitted. And Fred, again, thank you for joining us, sir.
Glad to be here. I hope it is warm on you as it is on me.
Yeah, it's here. It's more muggy than anything else, but hey, it's June, about to turn to July, so it's about time. I wanted to, I'm not sure if you have seen or read this article in regards to the pension crisis and the future of HBCUs in regards to, in a sense, getting. We saw where we had the philanthropist who paid for the student debts for all of the graduating class of Morehouse a while back. And we've also seen where a couple of alumni from Morgan State and Howard have donated, monetary gifts. But, apparently with the pension crisis going on and with a lot of kids who are going to, we all know about student loan debt that is and will exist for quite a while. The article, which was from HBCU Digest from the end of last month, basically talks about how, HBCUs may really have to start preparing for getting, unfortunately, lesser resources. Now, as you know, most of these schools are already on tight budgets as it is. How, first of all, talk a little bit about that, and how important is this going to be for the future of HBCUs and their students that are there now and intend to come there in the future?
Well, one thing we need to look at here, Tony, is this. HBCUs are our schools, specifically those who attended and graduated from an HBCU like myself, the churches that founded many, if not most of them. And we got to understand that most of our heroes in the black community are graduates of HBCUs. Even being from the north like you are. If you go back and look, a lot more kids were moving south, and we saw. And the easiest way to measure this, if you look at all the kids, young men that came down from the north and played basketball, they played basketball at southern schools because northern schools didn't want them, and they not only did not want basketball players, they didn't want football players, they didn't want track stars who were black. In other words, they didn't want no black students, and most of them didn't want black students on their campus. And it was more of a quota system to a point where as late as the mid-'50s, you had schools up north who would have maybe, if they had 5 black guys on their team, which was extremely rare, they wouldn't play but 2 of them at a time as a rule. And then if they were behind and in trouble, they would play a third one, and they never would put 4 or 5 on the court at one time. I mean, that wasn't broken until the coach for the Boston Celtics broke that up in the NBA. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up is, just to point to just how much on our own we've always been. We got to go back to the work of people like Booker T. Washington and all the other founding fathers of HBCUs and look at the great job they were able to do with next to no resources, in the height of segregation and all those kind of things. Bringing it forward, we have more resources now than we've ever had. It's just it's targeted in other directions. I talk to people a lot in working with HBCU Heritage Center. One of the questions I ask groups of, you look around with young men and young women, they're walking around wearing Michigan, Carolina, Duke, NC State, Alabama, Kentucky. All these schools at one time borrowed black folks. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes time to send their kid to school, a lot of them end up going to HBCUs. But isn't it ironic? They walk on campus with a Michigan shirt on, which tells you what? They're sending their children in one direction and their money in another, and then they wonder why they don't meet. Right. And see, these this is the crux of what we got to overcome. The other thing is our schools got to be more entrepreneurial. I started a project a few years ago, and I just launched. We're just launching now for Livingstone, officially as of Monday. But when you go out and look and say, my brother and his wife went to Livingstone. My sister followed him to Livingstone. My niece followed her to Livingstone. And then my sister-in-law and her 2 sisters all went to Livingstone. And that's what this project is, a family. This one in particular is a family project. But the thing we
and Fred, in that same vein, I hate to interrupt. You don't see as many of those legacies as you did back in the day. Now, am I correct, or am I overstating it, or is that understatement?
You are more than correct, because of those. Well, my brother and his kids, neither my brother and his wife nor his 2 sisters-in-laws had any kids. The other kids from the other 2 that actually had children, their kids went to Meredith in Carolina, and the other one's child went to East Carolina. And so, but out of the fact that my brother and his wife gave all their money to Livingstone, that's kind of what we're building on. Mm-hmm. And not only do you not have the legacy, it's rare. I mean, we have taken the route that says white schools are better, automatically inherently better, for us as well as better to us, and that's not necessarily so. You wonder why kids now are so out there when it comes to Black history, because the major reason for that is when you go to an HBCU, you're living history. I had the opportunity to walk around the same campus with Big House Gaines, for instance, and you had a chance to meet him and be around him and some of the other in the Black community when you were at in the Winston-Salem area. But see, that's the part of the legacy nobody wants to relate to. They're more interested in where Zion is going to go for his year of college, and then what he's going to do. Who's going? Is he going to be the number 1 pick? And we've lost our focus on what's valuable to us. And the sad thing is, as things are closing down, and as far as schools are being stretched even more, you don't have enough of situations like the gentleman who gave the money to basically gave the money to Morehouse to cover the debt for those roughly 300 young men. And one of the young men in that class is from the Raleigh area, and I remember they interviewed him on local television, and this young man was talking about, his indebtedness is almost $100,000. I'm thinking, whoa, I got a great education that cost me less than $10,000.
Right.
And although it wasn't from, was a state institution, but we don't. I think we have lost that zeal that we need to connect with HBCUs and understand that those were the shoulders we stood on, including a lot of those people who initiated HBCUs were slaves or recently freed slaves, and a lot of the ones who built HBCUs came out of slavery. And, granted, all those people are dead and gone, but we still stand on their shoulders. And
again, we're talking with Fred Whitted here on the subject of HBCUs and their current history and what could be their future history. To go on more so in what the article talks about in regards to in regards to defined contributions, pension plans, including like IRAs and 401s. Basically, there was a profound alteration of the private pension system after 1989, with a dramatic rise in defined contributions, pensions, and a corresponding decline in those same pensions as well. However, the take-up rate in that coverage was much greater for whites than blacks and Hispanics, with a share of households plans climbing from 26% in 1989 to 60% in 2016 among whites, from 16 to 34% among blacks, and then from 13 to 31 among Hispanics. Now, all in all, the proportion holding any pension wealth went up from 62 to 72% among whites, only 40 to 50% among blacks, and then 31 to 40% among Hispanics. Now, what that, it basically says what you've been saying in the sense of we're already playing from a bad corner of the field, and now that field gets even tougher, and there is no magic bullet or a magic pill that's going to save it. And the other thing to me, Fred, about the legacies is the folks who want to be able to put the money back into these schools, they're few and far between as well. I don't like to put a terrible face on, but those folks, we may be losing those folks. So where do some of those other resources come from?
Well, again, life is choice driven, and just in the initial analogy I used was you send your kids in one direction, your money in another direction, and then you wonder why they don't meet. Okay, is it truly necessary? It's the kind of things. I mean, I'll put it. This is what I said to a group how long ago. If you want to understand, there's more money in the black community than you think. If you don't think so, look at drug deals. Look at some of the other stuff that goes on in the community. Why do you need a Mercedes 500 when, say, a Toyota or name an American car, Cavalier will get you the same place, those kind of things, and you spend, say, $70,000-$80,000 on a car that that has like one of my friends, he has a Mercedes, and he made this great discovery that about every 3,000 miles he got to put another $400 or $500 in for the oil change and that kind of stuff. And if you don't do it, the car shuts down. So now you got a $70,000, $80,000 car that won't run up because you don't put another $500 into the tills, so to speak. You see, making those kind of choices, buying Nike tennis shoes for a child that can't even walk. We have made some bad choices and continue to make them sometimes. I couldn't convince either of my kids to go to an HBCU. But at the same time, though, they do honor and respect what HBCUs and know what it's all about. In one of them's case, they didn't have the major they wanted. I I let her go and get out of the house without hurting her feelings too bad. And then my son he fell in love with Virginia Tech before he was, well, basically around the time he was starting first grade. So when they accepted him, that was where he wanted to go. And, I still love him from a distance, but I still love him. But, when you look at the choices we make as people, and listen to the conversation that you hear about people who went to predominantly white schools. They don't feel connected. There's all kinds of ills they have, and but then at the time they were making the choice about going to an HBCU, they found 11 excuses not to go. Mm-hmm. Not understanding again that their connection with their own people helps not only build their own communities up, they also pour back into their community, and they are not so alienated from their community that you can't help the least of the ones that are out there. And it's really sad because, I live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and we have several neighborhoods that are being slowly but surely gentrified now. But at the same time, though, at one time you had situations where you'd have a doctor living next door to a mechanic. In most cases today, you won't have that because, and the other thing that when it comes to, and this is not necessarily from an HBCU standpoint, but, I know people who went to Fayetteville State back in the day prior to the mid-'60s when they took auto mechanics. One of them is matter of fact, one of them, I think his son is taking one of his son-in-laws is taking over now, but he has owned one of the best transmission shops in the Cumberland County area. Well, this gentleman got his start on Fayetteville State's campus, and HBCUs got away from that mechanical side of things, and we know everybody's not college material, but if you call a plumber, you call an electrician, you call one of these people like that with a trade. Mm-hmm. Look at what you have to pay them for them to show up at your house. They tap into. Matter of fact, most of them end up in their own business, but beyond, over and above that, they make a lot of money. And see, that's something we got away from too. But see, we have to recapture some level of the focus on what we've done for ourselves over the years, and then we got to come back and look at what can we do for ourselves in the future. And this conversation has to start happening immediately, because if we don't, we're going to lose. Like I say, we can only lose 103 institutions, I think it is now. But, the sad thing is you just saw what happened with Bennett College. If you know and understand the Bennett Bells and their legacy, there's no reason for that to happen. It really is not. And somebody somewhere dropped the ball internally as well as externally, because one thing I've been trying to track down as of late is what schools have been raising a lot of money and what schools are setting out to raise a lot of money. And that line is really short. Come Sunday, actually, the president of Claflin, Dr. Tisdale, will be stepping down after 25 years at the helm of his alma mater. But he moved his alma mater from basically an also-ran to one of the leading institutions among HBCUs. And not only is he took it from less than 1,000 students to now it's past 2,000 students, and they're expecting even more growth over the next 5 years, because he went out and did what he needed to do. He built the campus. He built the infrastructure academically, and then he raised money. And I understand what he did and how he did it. At the same time, though, there are other ways to raise money, because one of the projects we're working on not only raises money for the HBCU Heritage Center, but raises money for the individual institutions. And if we get more entrepreneurial as HBCUs, we get more entrepreneurs, and look at the fact that there are over 50 million people in black churches who supposedly have a connection to HBCUs. What if those people and those that, just adults, and there's something like 7,000 congregations, we'll say, in just two of the larger denominations, United Methodist and Baptist. What if those congregations were to purchase one of the books that we sell and take a portion of that and give it to the individual institution, also help us build the HBCU Heritage Center, and then use that to one, build their endowments, two, to help give scholarships to young people on their way in. In simple round numbers, it would be easy to raise $1 billion within 2 years. Stretch it out over 5 years, you could raise $10 billion. But see, our schools have gotten into this thing of raising money versus making money. And see, when you look at those people who we were talking about earlier, who invested $50 in a Michigan jersey, $75 in a Carolina or Duke jersey, they gave each, Duke only gets I think $15. Yeah, but how many you sell? Mm-hmm. Better still, how many did you buy? Right. And take if you took the money from just HBCU graduates and families alone that go to other schools, you were talking about millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. Zion has no obligation to come back and do anything for North Carolina Central. I mean, it's admirable on his part that Chris Paul has done and does a lot with Winston-Salem State, because his parents and I know his parents and his uncle were there just ahead of me.
Fred, I want to get. I got Orlando Hughes is on the line, another HBCU grad. I wanted to get him I know he wanted a question as well because time's a little short. Go right ahead, Orlando.
First of all, good evening to you, brothers. How are you doing tonight?
Good, man.
I'm just listening to Fred, and he's absolutely right. My concern when you talk about the churches, I believe that black churches are the way of the past and the wave of the future for us as a community. Not only investing in HBCUs, but allowing the foundation for black businesses. I don't know why we don't utilize these credit unions, the Omega Psi Phi credit union, the Psi credit union, a.k.a. We have the tools here that are available to us. We just don't utilize them. I mean, I heard you talking about, a Mercedes and how many folks have a Mercedes and so forth. And
I'm losing you.
And it makes no sense. Like you're in school to learn and get an education, but it's more, we want to be teams, so it's a fashion show. So I don't really have a question, T-Mac. I'm kind of rambling in on that as well, but I think that Fred's on point when he talks about the churches and what the churches can do, because the churches could buy a stake in these HBCUs and allow them to grow. And when you look at the AME Church, it's a shame that Morris Brown is in the condition that it's in when it's owned by the largest black church in America.
Absolutely. You are very much on point, and not just that. The church really is the wave of the future. It just has to reconnect with where it was when these schools got started, because if you go back and study, quite a few HBCUs started in the basement or the back pews or under the auspices of historical black churches. And this is when churches understood their role not only in the community at the time, but in the community as as pointing to the future. And like I said, Claflin has done a yeoman's job in capturing and connecting, but Claflin is the only one. I mean, I'll say regularly, very few people have done the kind of job that Dr. Harvey did up at Hampton. Spelman, Howard, and Morehouse have done good jobs. And among public schools, A&T probably has done a better job because A&T has gone out and built itself into one of the best STEM schools in the nation. But see, you had you had a chancellor there who, one, understood the technology because that's part of, I think, his doctorate is in electrical or computer engineering. So he has a leg up on a lot of presidents and chancellors. But at the same time, though, you don't have to know that side of the business per se as an individual. You hire people to cover your weaknesses. But, our schools got to become more entrepreneurial. And if they would do that, then a lot of the problems that we have, we wouldn't have. But beyond that, people, if we were investing in ourselves, other people would be more prone and more willing to invest in us, because this is basically what happens when schools get in trouble and get themselves out. When you start investing in yourselves, and that's one of the first questions bigger companies want to know, okay, Mr. Tony, you want me to invest in your school? How many of your employees invest? And I use the term invest simply because we're not talking about just giving. We're talking about investing, and we're talking about building for the future.
Exactly. We got Reggie Howell also on the line with us as well, of course, graduate of Virginia State. And Reggie, I don't know how much of the conversation you've been listening to, but do you have a question for Fred quickly?
Hey, gentlemen, been listening to the whole conversation. Matter of fact, Professor, I'm watching Vanderbilt and Michigan, and the two pitchers for the championship game right now, they had a black young man that's a freshman who is dynamite, and also in Michigan, I couldn't believe it, had a black young man pitching for them. So I'm like, their little secret. And guess what? Mom and Dad are there at the game. And the camera, of course, on Mom and Dad. Mom fine, too. I say that, Professor, because a lot of times, I guarantee, if you look at the literature of those parents, somewhere, even in Michigan, somewhere down the line is an HBCU connection. I don't care what nobody say, especially if Dad is 50 or 60 years old. But my main question to you, Professor, it seems like over and over again, we've seen this play be a bad Shakespeare play at the end, a tragedy. The people with doctoral degrees and master's degrees, how can we be so damn dumb as hell when it comes to business and economics, when it comes to moving these schools forward, in your opinion?
That's a long conversation with some more spirited things than I like to drink. But the short version of it is, again, we still buy into too much of their ice is colder, their gas burn is longer, and all that kind of stuff. If you think back about 2 or 3 years ago when the young man took the shot from Connecticut to beat Carolina, that young man's mother is a graduate of Claflin University. She was on one of the teams. She was on one of the teams that Coach Brownlee took to the Final Four of the NAIA Final back in the early 90s. Okay. Granted, there's an extenuating situation that how he was even up north to begin with. But at the same time, though, what if kids like that were playing at Claflin or Virginia State or Winston-Salem State? Because I can show you pictures of white people coming to see Earl Monroe play in 1965 and 66.
Yes, sir.
And this was when segregation was still at its height. They were not going to Carolina to see Carolina, they weren't even running the four corners at that time. But our folks, we got to be more entrepreneurial in nature. We got too much of a welfare mentality, gimme, 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 which has its place. But at the same time, though, let's go out and take our own resources. I mean, I tell people all the time, there's $10 billion out there in black history that we don't even tap. Well, what's it about? Black colleges. Because you realize most black colleges have never had a full-length book written about them, and most of those books that were written are older than us. So, there's a lot of fresh water on the bridge here that's untapped, but we do need to tap into it.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow, if I may, Professor, again, I do not understand where you have the, I call it soft money, when it comes to not only looking at paraphernalia sales at our games, but I'm sure you don't caught hell trying to get the history out of some of these schools about their history being released to you. If you could, one final question. What kind of obstacles have you faced with some of the schools who don't even want to talk to you about sharing their history?
You run into people who want to threaten you for use of their names and all those kind of things. But then, like I've told a couple of people that, okay, you have a full history department who have never done a historical research of your institution. Some of those schools who just this last 3 years who celebrated. I'll go all the way back to 2015 when they started celebrating 150 years with Shaw, right on up to the ones. We've had Hampton. I think it comes up this year. Federal State a couple of years ago. And there's been about 20 of them, the first wave of HBCUs. Most of those schools have no long history. I have more undercovers than Federal State does on their own institution. And we're going to be matter of fact, come July 1st, we're going to be pulling out theirs and redoing a couple of pieces to it, and we're going to release it because they've had 2 years to do it and they haven't done it. So, and their chancellor is now on sabbatical on his way out. He'll be on their payroll for another year. But, they got to be more entrepreneurial, and if they would do that, even to how they market, think about it. You and I both went to state institutions, but then, we're in a conference, we're in a black conference when the baseball team show up, it's the whitest conference. All of a sudden, the only thing, we think about it. We have more black golfers now than we do black baseball players. Mm. And then, tragically, our baseball team has been eliminated after 9 years, and it goes away as the second most successful program we've ever had, because in 9 years we won 7 championships. No other program has performed like that. Initially, golf performed like that. Then they did away with the golf program while I was in school, and then they brought it back, and they're bringing it back again. But we got to learn how to make money as well as how people give us money.
Fred, could you just let folks know about the Black Heritage Review, how they can get in touch with you?
Black Heritage Review .com. We're on Facebook, Black Heritage Review. We also have a page on Facebook of HBCU Heritage Center, and they're somewhat interconnected. But either way, our information is out there on Facebook. Push come to shove, you can come directly to me, Fred Whitted, on Facebook, and www.blackheritagereview.com, and our email address is blackheritagereview@yahoo.com.
Appreciate the knowledge, sir. We'll definitely be in touch. Look
forward to it.
Take care now.
And if if you're a Livingstone graduate, your book is complete. We just received the first boxes of them on Tuesday, and we started mailing the ones that we had pre-ordered have been mailed. So if you pre-purchase, yours is in the mail. If you didn't pre-purchase, just go to blackheritagereview.com, download the order form, and make a purchase, and it'll be on its way to you within 2 days.
Appreciate it, Fred. Take care. Going to take a quick break.
You too.
Bring in Tom Donaldson, talk a little Major League Baseball and other things here on the pad. Stay tuned.
Every day I wake and everything is broken. Turning off my phone just to get out of bed. Get home every evening and history's repeating. Turning off my phone 'cause it's hurting my chest. Yeah, and heaven knows I'm not helpless. Yeah, but what can I do? I wanna see. I can't sit and hope. I can't just sit and pray that I can find a love when all I see is pain. Falling to my knees, and though I do believe, I can't just breathe, baby, breathe. I can't just breathe. All I hear is voices, everybody's talking. Nothing real is happening 'cause nothing is new. Now when all is tragic and I just feel sedated, why do I feel numb? Is that all I can do? Yeah, and heaven knows I'm not helpless. Yeah, but I'm only human. I can't see the use in me crying. I'm not even trying to make the change I wanna see. I can't sit and hope. I can't just sit and pray that I can find a love when all I see is pain. I fall into my knees, and though I do believe, I can't just breathe, baby, breathe. I can't just breathe, baby, breathe. And heaven knows I'm not helpless. But what can I do? Yeah, can't see the use in me crying if I'm not even trying to make the change I wanna see. I can't sit and hope. I can't just sit and pray that I can find a love when all I see is pain. I try to do the things I say that I believe. I can't just breathe, baby, breathe. I can't just breathe, baby, breathe. I can't just breathe, baby, breathe. Falling to my knees, and though I do believe, I can't just breathe, baby, breathe.
And we welcome you back to the Batchelor Pad. Excuse me, Batchelor Pad here on blogtalkradio.com and the Batchelor Pad Radio Network. Want to get right back to the phones, bring in our second guest for the night. Of course, he is the host of the Donaldson Files And I seem to remember him being a decent sports writer as well, but my memory gets a little hazy at times. It's Tom Donaldson, of course, here on the pad. How you doing, Tom?
Real good. How's yourself doing?
Good. If I can just stop sneezing on the air, I'll be fine, but that's another story.
What you're telling me, so you're hitting the allergy season, huh?
No. Just you know what? I think it's just a cold coming on, but I'll be okay. I wanted to talk a little Major League Baseball, and the first subject I really wanted to bring up in regards to this whole Tampa-Montreal triangle that that Major League Baseball has perpetuated and now are trying to force down folks. Now, Tampa has been a burial ground since it's been there. Yes, they've been to the World Series. Yes, they've been whatever. They're sort of like, Moneyball East in a sense with what they do. They brought the closer. But to me, it's obvious that baseball is just not going to work in Tampa. And now the mayor has said he will not fund a new stadium for a team that's only going to play half a season at Tropicana Field. Their lease is until 2024. So what's your take on this, and why is baseball sort of trying to seemingly screw one team to get another team back to a city that got screwed before, Montreal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, number one, they really, you made this point very simply. You go watch the Tampa, and how many empty seats do you see? This is a team that, this year they're fighting for first place. I mean, they're only 5 games. They're in the playoff hunt, and you would think that would be enough to increase the crowd, but it hasn't. But I'm kind of asking myself, I know Montreal, had some good crowd in the early 90s when they had the, Andrew Dawson teams. But certainly there was a reason why they went to Washington. So maybe my question I would throw back is there any other cities out there you would look at? Number 2, if you're going to say we're going to play half of the games, why did you simply say, just simply make a decision? Okay, here's where we're going. Because, this is kind of you've already told fans of one city, we got 1 foot out the door. And the mayor put it, don't think we're going to build you a new stadium now. Mm-hmm. With that. And the other side of the equation is, what's Montreal, is Montreal ready for another franchise?
And see, my thing is, if you're going to go to Montreal, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a problem with them going to Montreal. I think it makes sense. I think because, we all, history might have, if it wasn't for the 94 strike, we wouldn't have the Washington Nationals, I think. I think the Expos would have won a World Series or would have come close to winning a World Series, and it would have been enough for them to get that new ballpark, and the team would still be there. I'm a little biased because, that's where Jackie Robinson began his baseball career, so I would love to see a team in Montreal. But the actual thing of putting a team in Montreal, I don't have a problem with, because when you mix, because let's face it, if you move Tampa to Montreal, who becomes their natural rival? The Blue Jays, another team struggling. So those 19 games in and of itself could be something that could revive baseball in Canada. And considering what's just come off on the hoop side, it would make sense, because the ironic thing to me is that Major League Baseball screwed over Montreal as it is, and now they're literally going to try to steal another team and try to put it in there. And let's put it this way: it could have been done a lot smarter, to me. And I think the way that they're doing it, and basically, in a sense, holding 2 cities hostages, just shows you baseball's greed, and most importantly, just baseball's ignorance.
Yeah, well, nobody's ever accused baseball of being, I kind of view it this way, because I've been thinking about this all day. And the first thing that popped in my mind is what's happening right now. I mean, you got baseball season full throw, but what are a lot of people in the sports world talking about? The NBA draft, the NBA free agency, the NBA summer league,
and NFL, and then NFL another month or so when they open camp.
And then you're going to have NFL camp. And baseball has fallen behind in the marketing side of that equation, where they literally, I mean, it's like, okay, you had the baseball draft. Did anybody know about it? Other than on the baseball network, that was it. I mean, unless you were a baseball fanatic or you're like myself, you're following the Kansas City Royals, so you're basically, looking to see what the future team's going to look like because the present team sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I always thought, your team is bad when you're looking at the minor leagues on a daily basis. But and I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I guess in a way, I keep, you're in a sense of Montreal would make a logical fit, but I think baseball has to make a decision. First of all, are the owners ready to move? Do you have ownership ready to come in, buy the team, and take it? But this, half foot in, half foot out, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because you're not making a commitment, and if you're a fan in either city, you got to be asking yourself, are they coming? Are they leaving? Give me a reason to show up to the game, but this is not a reason. And certainly Tampa, the attendance there has not been what you would expect to be, even when they have winning teams. They're not exactly feeling the seats.
Exactly.
So there is that there. And
yeah, and you're right. The national broadcast, the numbers are down. It's unless you're like a hardcore fan like myself or whatever, you're not. There's very few folks that are watching. Very, very few folks are watching.
Well, here's the thing that comes into play is this. I thought about this. If we sat back and talked, here's the question I'd ask you. If you went and said to the average fan, give me 10 NBA players, I'll bet you a lot of fans could give you 10 NBA players they know. Can you do the same for baseball?
Right.
Can you give me just 10 players? I mean, okay, just give me 10 players not on your team that are good or fans or stars. I mean, if that's, they're not building the stars. In the NBA, you got stars. In NFL, you got stars. You got the whole season. The Major League Baseball has not caught up to that marketing side where they're keeping people interested in the product on a yearly basis, and they're not promoting the superstars. I mean, like a Trout as an example. I mean, this guy should be everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Is he?
Let me switch.
Yeah.
Let me switch gears. Let's just switch gears and go to the NBA. And the questions are still up in the air. I guess free agency officially will be starting in another few weeks from now. But the Celtics still the specter of Kyrie Irving. Will he stay? Will he go with the Celtics? But first of all, what did you think of their draft? And I guess we've talked about this before, but it just even more so now.
Yeah.
Does Kyrie stay or does he go? And if so, where? But first of all, talk about the Celtics draft.
I like the draft. I mean, the thing is, I've seen Langford play because I live in the Midwest, so I see him, in the Big Ten, and the kids are going to be a good player. I mean, this kid played hurt all year. He didn't have, he had a thumb that should have been operated on, and he played with that all year. And that shows me something. And I like Grant Williams. I've seen this guy play. He's a smart player. He's, you're not seeing guys. You're looking at guys who I think 2 or 3 years down the road are going to be integral parts of that team. And it's going to, and I'm not. And to me, Irving's out the door. I really think I think there's a part of me that, let's be blunt. I think Irving has pretty much done his divorce. I think he wants to go elsewhere. And I think the Celtics have come to the conclusion, okay, if you don't want to be here, fine. We'll just, we'll save the money we spent on you, and we'll go get somebody else who wants to be here. And I do think that, it's not like the cupboard's bare. Because I really think that Tatum and Brown are two kids who in the next couple of years are going to be superstars in their own right. So, I mean, next year, my view is they're going to win 45 games next year plus. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be in the top four. They won't be in the Eastern Conference Final. I think that's either going to be Milwaukee or Philadelphia, depending on how their free agency happens. To me, a bigger loss was Horford, because I think Horford was that mature guy who basically was the locker room guy you needed. He was the mature guy who did everything to make everybody else better around him. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes.
Exactly. 646-929-0130, number to join us here. We're talking baseball, basketball, all those sorts of things with Tom Donaldson here. We got about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. You'll lose the live feed. So if you want to listen to the show, please give us a buzz at 646-929-0130. And I want to change the question over to Orlando Hughes.
Hey, Tom, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, we're good, Orlando. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah. So, I guess we'll keep it. I don't want to talk baseball in this city right now. The subject was me walking with my boys in public. I may get, assassinated by the birds if I talk Philly in baseball. But what I will say, one thing for baseball, and I don't know why it hasn't been thrown out there. If Major League is looking for success in some a type of draw, this is the perfect opportunity to take their team down to San Juan.
Yeah, that's another
Put
thought.
the Rays in San Juan, and San Juan will be a natural powerhouse draw. It'll average 85% capacity at all times, and it'll be it's their national pastime anyway. So why not put the team in San Juan? Like, I'm sure the Yankees will love San Juan because you get the New York Puerto Ricans. Well, Boston's more Dominican, but you still get that Boston crowd as well as the Toronto, and you get that draw off of that AL East with a team in Puerto Rico. I don't know why. I kick myself.
Let me throw another thought out, because baseball has got 30 teams.
Right.
Why not add two teams in San Juan? I never thought of San Juan, but that makes sense. Add San Juan to the American League, and add, there's got to be a city out there that's good enough to put a baseball team. That's going to have the enough population to put a baseball team in. But that would be kind of an interesting. That'd be interesting.
I think Charlotte
and put them in the
Charlotte will be a city that can draw for baseball. Hell, we put up with the Braves and their lackluster, half behind, fans for years, and so. But San Juan will be perfect. I would say the DR, but what's going on in the Dominican Republic, I wouldn't send my worst enemy down there.
Well, the thing is, San Juan, because it's still part of the United States, so but it makes sense. Correct. Plus, because you make a pretty good point. You got markets like New York. You have Boston, New York's a good Boston, and who knows? Maybe there's a part of me that says maybe you can keep Tampa in Tampa because there's a big Puerto Rican fan base in Tampa. Can you imagine Tampa playing San Juan?
but I don't think Tampa deserved the team anyway. They have shown, both Florida teams have shown the inability to support this, and I think that's real poor. But Major League Sports are not going to pull out of Florida because it's just you have all the billionaires that are down in that area, which is ridiculous.
Well, plus you have to assume like Miami's a good TV market, or you presume it to be. It's a good TV market. So the other thing, let's talk this NBA. Sure.
I think this year's draft I think it's more or less that you're going to have the Edwards, the Thybulles. These are going to be the guys that are going to define the league. I don't think that Zion, unfortunately, I can't see him having extended success in the league because of his size. He's already at 4% body fat, but you can't play basketball at 280 pounds at 6'7".
Yeah.
It's just not going to.
Yeah.
Everything in my head that computes, and it's a lot of smoke going on right now, but everything says that he can't survive at that weight. What are your thoughts?
I think, here's the thing. I think my view of him is that he's got a good, quickness. He's got the ability to be and I do, and he's a good shooter, and I think that's going to be the key element. And if you surround him with the right people, I think he'll do fine. Now, whether or not he'll be an Anthony Davis is another question.
that trumpet, you know it's the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network. I'm Dr. Larry Fedewa. I'm your host for the next hour. Tonight, we are going to talk about various challenges that face the Trump administration. And our opening statement has to do with tariffs, taxes, and turmoil. Every time the pundits predict the next move in President Trump's many negotiations, he does something unexpected. He warns Iraq not to close the Straits of Hormuz. So, according to the news, he's a warmonger. Then he cancels the military strike for humanitarian considerations. So, he is a coward. Then he piles on sanctions. So he is scaring the Ayatollahs into desperation, which will lead to war. And all this happened in 3 days. At the same time, he scheduled, then postponed, a token roundup of convicted illegal trespassers from foreign countries in 10 cities, 7 of which are sanctuary cities. And this is presumably to assert the federal precedence over local ordinances. Also, he sent an undisclosed letter, which was well received, to North Korea's Kim Jong-un. All of this amid preparations for a meeting this coming weekend with China's President Xi and to seek progress in the trade war with China. So if nothing else, no one can accuse this president of not attending to business. And how do we evaluate this whirlwind president? A few things have become clear by this time. For one thing, he clearly judges himself on accomplishments rather than promises or on his performance in press conferences. This ethic is common in the world of business, but not in the world of politics. Thus, his impressive list of promises kept fails to impress the Washington establishment, which focuses on its own myopic view of the very few issues of its immediate concern. So the Democrats are most interested in impeaching the president, regardless of his record. The neocons, the neoconservative never-Trumpers, are critical of his reluctance to use military force. The anti-gun lobby can think only of his support for citizens bearing arms. And minorities have been fed a narrative accusing the president of being a white racist in spite of the lack of evidence to support this allegation. And so it goes. The Washington political elite have prospered under the policies and customs which have prevailed since President Eisenhower, and there is no love for outliers like Reagan and Trump. In their view, presidents are supposed to consult the accepted experts on the various issues which come across their desk, follow their advice, make appointments from their ranks, and advocate policies of war and peace which allow them to prosper. Trump does none of these things. He is largely unpredictable. What the opposition resents more than anything else, perhaps, is the fact that they are not part of the decision-making process. In fact, they are so far removed that they don't even understand the thinking behind most of his actions. They are quick to impute motives and make solemn judgments ad hoc on anything he says or does, but events usually prove them wrong. All the proof needed for this assertion can be found on the editorial pages of the New York Times or the CNN broadcasts. And by the way, the main broadcast networks tend to bury Trump news, except on Sunday morning, of course. What we do know is that President Trump is a risk taker. He has wagered his re-election on winning the trade war with China. If he does not succeed in coming to some kind of trade accommodation with China, his credibility will be seriously damaged. This confrontation has become the signature initiative of his presidency so far, but lost to the concern about tariffs is what he has achieved already in standing up to China as the first U.S. president to do so. If a deal with China is worked out, the North Korean standoff may very well follow, since the North Koreans cannot prevail against both the U.S. and China. If Mr. Trump succeeds in these two initiatives, his will be considered by historians as a truly transformative presidency, and the 21st century will be another American century. If he fails and then loses a second term, the establishment will resume power, and the USA may follow the same fate in the 21st century as did the British Empire in the 20th century, when the inevitable rise of China consigns the USA to a gradual decline into a second-class power. Now, for the rest of this program, I want to discuss some of the details behind this statement, and particularly the Chinese rivalry and the impact of all this on the 2020 elections. When I say that the decline of the American economy into second-class status may well depend on the re-election of Donald Trump, what I'm talking about is the China. That the Chinese have been they take a long view, a 50-year view of their history, and they plan accordingly. So they are very, and they've made an awful lot of progress in the last 30 years, much of it due to the inability and the lack of desire on the part of the United States, which has been the dominant economic power in that period, to take them to task and to try to compete with them on a level playing field. Instead, we ceded the playing field entirely to the Chinese, and they took advantage of it by denuding our country of its manufacturing capabilities, especially its sophisticated manufacturing, and that we would be talking principally about the digital revolution. Much of the intellectual property, as you know, from in that field has come from us, from our various very innovative and productive companies, but it has been copied and redistributed under China by the Chinese and under Chinese apparatus. And so they end up knowing just about everything we know. Well, if they are going to continue to combine that knowledge with a much cheaper labor market, and if the United States would do nothing to try to in fact, would encourage that kind of behavior as it has, then we are in a position where we can't possibly win the long war or the long contest with the Chinese. We put ourselves at too much of a disadvantage. So the fact that the President of the United States has finally decided that Chinese will not continue to take advantage of us, even though it's very late in the day, still we have a good chance of pulling this off. And we're going to step aside for a second here, and you're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network.
Hey, this is L.A. Batchelor reminding you to join us on the Donaldson Files with your host, Tom Donaldson and Coco Constantly. Join them and listen to all the topics and discussions on Mondays on WCOMFM.org or on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at blogtalkradio.com/LA Batchelor. It is politics that you've never heard before on the Donaldson Files. And if you miss any part of their broadcast, you can listen to the podcast at our website, thebachelorpadnetwork.com.
You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network. I'm Dr. Larry Fedewa, and we're talking about the various challenges that the Trump administration is facing at this time and in the near future. The last point I was making was that China is in the long war, in the 50-year view of the contest to become the dominant economic power in the world. And in order to do that, of course, they have to displace the United States, which now holds that position. We are in a position. We are actually in a very favorable position at the moment to win that war, or at least to maintain our position relative to the Chinese. For probably a good period of time. The tariff war that is being undertaken now by the administration shows us that we actually have so much more leverage than the Chinese because of the fact that we import there are various estimates, but somewhere in the level of 20 or 25 times the amount of goods and services. The services is the part that is very hard to quantify, but the goods and services that we import from the Chinese are far greater than what they import from us. So therefore, we have when we put a tariff on any outputs of any products, the impact on us is very minimal, and the impact on them is very substantial. So therefore, that gives us the kind of leverage that we are counting on to get the trade situation into a far greater balance. Much more important, frankly, than the dollars is the intellectual property protection, which frankly has not existed in the present scheme of things, and it has had an impact already on the ability of some of our larger and more active Chinese companies, American companies with Chinese ties, particularly companies that depend so heavily on their labor supply or their labor to produce their products. I think, for example, Apple is an excellent example of that. So these people are already beginning to feel a lot of stress because the Chinese are trying to fight back by tightening the screws, and that, of course, is inclining a lot of these American companies to rethink their position about exporting their production to China and bringing it back to the United States. Same thing is true, by the way, in a lesser degree with Europe, because we have been taken advantage of by our enemies, by our friends as well as our adversaries, and that is not without our collusion. By the way, they talk a lot about collusion in the Trump administration. Frankly, the collusion has been going on for a long time in relation to our trade, because we have never disputed the ascendancy of the other trading partners who are in the position of getting 25 times, in some cases, the tariffs on our exports compared to what we get. They get, or we get on our own exports. So that balance is also being redressed, and these things are very, very cantankerous to the established ways of doing, to the people who are part of the so-called establishment in the United States, both in government and in industry. But the idea of putting American citizens first is a very popular idea with the American public, and probably has an awful lot to do with the fact that Mr. Trump won the election. The first thing to remember about this whole Chinese American clash on the trade front is that, first of all, it is a redress of a long-standing injustice on the part of the Chinese toward the United States, not without our consent, but nevertheless it occurred, and it had enormous economic impacts, particularly in moving the manufacturing base of the United States overseas, and in the process really creating a tremendous deficit of wealth in on the part of the American working class, and it's something that's very noticeable, something that we've been worrying about in this program for the past 2 or 3 months in considerable detail. It is also the so-called wealth gap between the 1% of American population which owns as much as 80% of all American assets, compared to the 80 to the rest of the other 99%, particularly the working class of the majority of Americans, which hold less than 20% of the assets of the United States, and that includes not only income but also holdings. And that's why we use the term wealth instead of income. But anyway, this whole last two really generation, and particularly the last 15 years, have been there has been a real discrepancy between what the working people of the United States have been, what their share of the prosperity that has been invented by our industrial base, and particularly the digital revolution, and their own wealth. So a lot of that has to do with the fact that the developing world, and of which China is the largest, have taken the position that they can provide labor at a much cheaper cost, and that has taken labor away from the United States and put it in their countries. Well, the Trump administration is attempting to change that and to reverse that trend, and they have had a considerable amount of success. That, in has a lot to do with the fact that Trump is going to be favored for re-election, provided that certain things go his way. And the first of those is that he has to win this tariff war. If he does not, then the chances of his re-election are reduced, according to some of the prognosticators, like. So I'm not going to mention names here, but from about 65% down to about 30%. So that is a very critical discussion, or a very critical issue for the future of Mr. Trump as the President of the United States. Now we have to remember that so far that this contest between China and the United States for economic dominance has not been military. It's been economic. There is considerable interest, however, in the fact that the Chinese do seem to be getting a much more vigorous military policy, and we already know they have a huge army. But so for land purposes, for a land war, they are extremely well equipped. Up until very recently, they have not been well equipped for either a war on the seas or overseas. So now they are apparently getting a good deal more aggressive in that regard. The question really has to do, though, with what their plans are. It appears that their plans are basically to consolidate their position as the primary military as well as economic force of the Far East of Asia. And so far, at least, their aggression has not been nearly as evident in relation to the United States. However, Taiwan and the Philippines are definitely in their scope of interest. So that could be the next level of interest. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network.
Join Barry Barnes for Locker Talk on the Batchelor Pad Network as he presents NFL news and evaluates players. Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern at blogtalkradio.com.
Hello, this is Sandy Eason, the host of Sandy's Secrets. Come and join us, where we will be talking about women's issues of sexuality, sensuality, and self-love. We'll be coming soon exclusively on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network.
You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network, and you can follow my writings on my website, drlarryonline.com, and we are, and also on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network website. And the podcasts of all of our programs that are on this network are available there under the titles of the various programs. So if you miss something or you want to hear it again, go to the Batchelor Pad Network and you'll find the podcast of each program available. We're talking about the Chinese position or posturing relative to the military side of things, and we're in the position right now where it is not of interest to the Chinese apparently to challenge us other than in their own backyard, which is essentially the South China Sea. But the danger spots appear with the whole issue of Taiwan is definitely a trouble spot. As everyone knows, the United States has been a sponsor of Taiwan since Chiang Kai-shek started it in the 1940s, and it is never the relationships between Taiwan and mainland China have been very tense ever since. And then in addition to that, now we have this uprising in Hong Kong, which was under British rule for until relatively recently, I think 2004, and they are not very interested in having the kind of authoritarian government that is represented by the Chinese communists, and so they're letting the communists know by way of approximately 1 million to 2 million people in various demonstrations over the last couple of weeks. So these are definitely trouble spots, but in general, the relationship between the two presidents of China and the United States can apparently remain quite cordial and quite confined to the economic rivalry as opposed to any military threat. Even though it does take some, we do have to be cautious. Now, the next issue that I really wanted to mention was I implied in the opening statement that the Democrats, if the Republicans don't win the 2020 election, then of course the Democrats will. And the question is how much, what is their relative posture to the establishment that's been in power for the last two generations, and that frankly is a really significant question, because none of the current candidates, except possibly Joseph Biden, would be very happy with that kind of a description. They do not see themselves as part of the typical establishment. However, there is another angle or another faction in the party, and that's represented by the power, the leadership of the House of Representatives. And in this case, it's really a question of what in the world the Democrats are going to end up with here. So far, one of the major factors in their entire issue, their entire presumed platform, is the impeachment of the current president. The leadership is against the idea of doing that, of getting into an impeachment, because there's so little support for that in the general population, and they know for sure that any impeachment that they could get past the House of Representatives is certainly going to be defeated in the United States Senate, which is controlled by the Republicans. So the whole idea of a impeachment process, which actually leads to articles of impeachment and actually leads to a trial in the Senate, is doomed to not only failure but also apparently it would be a very divisive factor in the general public as well. People like to remember that the only other impeachment of, there'd only been two in the whole history of the United States, and William Jefferson Clinton was the second one. And after his impeachment by the Senate failed, he actually got more popular than he had been before. So it's a cautionary tale for the Democrats, but there are a lot of young Democrats who don't remember all of that, and they are also being pressed by some Democrat donors who are very influential in the party, the most visible of whom is Tom Steyer. But the idea that they're going to spend a good deal of their capital on their political capital on trying to impeach the current president suggests that even that if they do follow that approach, how would they win? And if they did win, what would they do? Well, there is a lot of discussion about that. The one approach is that the reason that Mr. Biden is as popular as he is in the polls, anyway, is because he is the only one that is apparently a part of the current establishment. And he is considered to be a moderate and not a wild-eyed socialist. He, of course, has some serious issues himself, and we're going to find another factor is that a lot of while the Democrats are going to be focusing on trying to get an impeachment going, at the same time the Republicans are going to be showing various serious implications of the FBI and perhaps the major leadership, at least, of the intelligence community to be highly biased and have taken positions and actions to unseat an existing American president, both before and after the election. And their attempt at a coup d'etat is going to be displayed, apparently, rather dramatically by the new Attorney General, and his actions are bound to be revealed and made public at about the same time, which would be next fall, 2019, that the Democrats' impeachment hearings would be started. So it's really going to be a very entertaining fall in American politics. And the reason for that timing is because once we hit the 2020 itself, there will be no stomach at all for in the public. There's very little now, but even what there is will disappear because the public will most likely take the position we got a election coming up, and we'll settle it by the traditional means as to who the next president is going to be. So none of the current candidates apparently would be considered an establishment except for Mr. Biden. And Mr. Biden's got whoever is going to be on the Democratic side. There's going to be a lot of scandal on the base because of the actions of the Obama people who tried to prevent and then unseat the Republican president. So therefore, it's not a fait accompli that even if the president does falter on some of these major issues, that he would not be reelected. It's just it's really an open possibility. If he is successful, it looks like he will win. If he's not successful, it is really kind of a open issue. But there are a couple of things about the establishment that we ought to note, although I don't want to take a lot of time on it. One is that the the politicians in the established order of the last 50, 60 years. We're going to step aside here for a second. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network.
Hey, this is L.A. Batchelor reminding you, if you're looking for real discussion on sports, politics, religion, and other topics, you need to join us on Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern at WCOMFM.org, on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. at blogtalkradio.com/LA-Batchelor, and on Thursdays at the same web address. Follow us on Facebook at Pad Nation, on Twitter, Pad Nation, the number 2 at Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can email us with your requests, your comments, your concerns, anything you want at our email address at LABatchelor with a T, BATCHELOR 40@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Pad Nation, Instagram, and of course, if you missed any part of our broadcast, make sure you go to theBatchelorPadNetwork.com and listen and enjoy the Batchelor Pad.
You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network, and I'm Dr. Larry Fedewa. We're talking about the possible, some of the considerations about the election coming up in 2020. I was about to make the notification that, or at least the sidebar, that when we talk about the establishment politicians, we're also talking about money. It's a real interesting factor that people like Pelosi and Biden and McConnell and a number of others make approximately $200,000 a year, and they're in there for 20 or 30 years, and they end up as multimillionaires. And how in the world did that ever happen? Well, it happens because of a lot of things, but it does happen, and so there is more than just a ideological or social type of interest in the traditional politicians in the United States. They in the United States establishment, they do very well on it. So
caller has a question.
We have a caller with a question, and I guess, well, I think, why don't we take that now, and we still have to talk about the possible threats from the on the Trump side to an election. Caller?
Hi,
yes.
Dr. Larry.
Yes, ma'am.
Diane. This is Diane and Brian Turner, and we are
hi.
great fans of your radio program, and we value greatly all of your opinions. I don't know if this is a sidebar, but how do you perceive this first debate of these Democratic candidates to turn out tonight? Do you have any idea who the front runners or who the top topics what the most important topics will be discussed tonight? Thank you, Larry.
Only from the congressional and the news, and that's not very accurate, I don't think. I really don't. I'm looking forward to finding out what in the world they are going to be talking about. It appears reparations is one of the key topics that they want to deal with, and then of course the tradition, the typical socialist agenda of free health care and free education and free everything else, I guess. But I really don't have a lot of insight into that. I think we'll know a lot more, though, by Friday night, that we'll have a better idea of who's who and who is able to talk in terms that the rest of us can understand. But I appreciate the call, and we're going to. I just want to bring out a couple of possible things that could have a tremendous impact on the election on the Trump side, and there are two major issues, I think. One is if we, well, really three. The first issue is if there is a recession, there could be a serious implication for the current president. Generally speaking, if recessions are going on, they work against the incumbent, and that is a possibility. It's by no means a probability at this point, but it is a factor that could in fact change the geography of the election. The second issue is financial. If there is a strong rumor going around in the hard money community, by that I mean the gold standard, people that are in favor of the gold standard, that the president will, at some time probably this summer, reboot the dollar. And if he does that, the current thinking is that it would be at $10,000 a gold ounce. An ounce of gold would be officially decreed by the United States government at $10,000 an ounce. If he does that, the reason for doing it, by the way, is that the government is about to run out of money. The Treasury Department has predicted that the government will the Treasury will not be able to implement a budget for the next fiscal year, fiscal 2020, because of lack of liquidity. And if that happens, I mean the Obama administration was their approach was to do this quantitative easing, which is in effect printing money to, and of course the impact should have been a considerable inflation. It wasn't because we were in a recession for most of that period, but it definitely took 1 to 2 points off the GDP. And it's unlikely that for one thing they don't have any place to go as far as quantitative easing. Their interest rate is already only 2%, 2.25%. So that seems like an unlikely scenario. However, there's got to be some alternative. What alternative is there? We can't. The main alternative would be to default, and of course, if we did that, the entire economic structure would fall down. So they have to do something. Somebody has to do something, and the rumor is that there will be a rebooting of the dollar, and the dollar will be pegged at $10,000 a gold ounce. which in fact would reduce the United States deficit by approximately. You take the 22 trillion divided by 10,000, and you've got the current. You would have the current amount of the deficit, which would be significantly less than what it is now, probably in the area of about $5 trillion. That's one thing. And the second thing is that there could be the third possible event that could happen would be that there would be a dramatic resurgence of the Democrat Party around a leader that maybe is not available right now, and that rumor is that it would be Michelle Obama. If Michelle Obama were suddenly injected into the 2020 campaign, it could be that she could change. It could possibly, anyway, change the entire complexion of the outcome. So those are the three major obstacles that might change the Trump position. And I'd like to welcome Tom Donaldson to join me here in the last quarter of this program. And Tom, I'm sure you've got some ideas there about the 2020 election. So Tom, if you get a chance, come on in when you're ready.
I am ready. Thank you.
Okay.
I have to apologize. I had myself on mute.
Oh, well, some of us would rather have it. Some of us would rather be on mute. So, what do you? You're the expert on the election here. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to say the number one aspect, obviously, if the economy stays strong or stays where it is, it's going to benefit Trump. If there's any slippage, it could hurt Trump. And so, yes, it is always the economy stupid. So that's what you have to look at. The second thing you have to look at is any foreign policy disaster that could, or let's say anything that comes unexpected. On the reverse side of that, you brought up the Chinese. If you have a favorable response, what will be perceived as a favorable response with the Chinese, that would not just be beneficial, but it could also be beneficial to the economy.
Right.
Since it would increase and liberalize the trade. And right now, the one issue that you have to be looking at is that the Chinese economy, depending on which statistics you read, is slowing down. And that international trade is starting to slow down. Europe is slowing down. So these are things that could have an impact on the United States as well.
Yeah, if they get a good agreement with the Chinese in the trade war, that almost automatically eliminates the possibility of a recession.
Yeah, and I think there's not only that, but it strengthens his hands as the foreign policy president. And I do think, to me, it's like in the case of the recent case in Iran. Trump has kind of made it clear that he'll be the peace president. I mean, if you sit back and you think about it, he's made it clear we're going to have no more additional involvement or no more additional crusades to our nation building or whatever else. And I think his long-term strategy has always been that if we're going to make a focus, the focus needs to be on the rise of China as opposed to being stuck around in the Middle East. Yeah. And I know we discussed this on our show. The big thing that's changed over the past decade is we are now the exporter of oil. We're the exporters. We're not the importers. Whereas the Chinese get a good portion, and the Chinese get a percentage, a high percentage of their oil is coming from the Middle East and through the Horse Strait. So any delay in
60%
benefits. Yeah, any delay that any impact on that will in fact be, detrimental to the Chinese more than to us.
Well, and it also gives us leverage. The fact that we are a net exporter now gives us leverage for taking the place of anybody in the Middle East that falters, like, for example, Iran. Because we can make up for what they're lacking, and maybe actually, if you look at the output of Iran oil in the last year, that it is almost it's not incidental, but it certainly is not very significant compared to the United States. So what do you think about, do you think that the break, let's take a break here, and this is the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network.
If you want to hear another view of the latest developments in Trump's Washington, listen to the Dr. Larry Show. Every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Dr. Larry is a former businessman, entrepreneur, college president, and author who provides background and context for current events and trends in politics, education, foreign policy, and religion from a conservative perspective. Tune in and hear the other side as Dr. Larry talks with Washington insiders exclusively on blogtalkradio.com and the podcast at the BatchelorPadNetwork.com.
The Dr. Larry Show. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network, and we're talking to Tom Donaldson, who is also on the Batchelor Pad Network. And Tom, what do you think about the idea of a dark horse candidate coming out from the Democrat side?
I'm going to say, I've learned a long time ago, don't discount anything. I'm going to say at this point, I don't think it will happen. But if it does, it would have to be somebody like a Michelle Obama who can put together a political machine rather quickly, or let's say people already know. But I just don't see that happening. I don't see it happening, but I'm not. We've learned over the last several years not to discount anything.
What do you think she could beat Trump?
That's an interesting question, because in effect she'd be running as her husband. I mean, if you want to think about it. So, and certainly she would bring a different coalition than, let's say, what some of the others will bring. I mean, the first thing, obviously, is that the Democratic Party lost about 1 million black voters staying home, and another about 300,000 actually voted for Trump that didn't vote, let's say, voted for Obama. And so, that 1 million, comes back in play as opposed to staying home. And there's no guarantee that even right now that if Joe Biden is going to command the same loyalty of black America that, let's say, Obama did as far as voter turnout.
Well, that's a good point, the turnout. Well, it strikes me that she could, if they suddenly came out, let's say that they didn't get a candidate on the first ballot in the convention, and they suddenly put her name in, she could sweep that convention. And once that happened,
I mean,
you would really have some terrific enthusiasm on the part of the Democratic coalition.
But there's a point that you brought up, and it'd be interesting to see how Michelle would be impacted by it. But certainly Joe Biden will be, and that is the FBI investigations. The Barr investigation going into the vice, of course, because if you want to know why the Democrats right now are rushing everything they can to get, let's say, Mueller to get talking, the impeachment talking, all that, because they have a very good feeling that this is going to be what boomerangs. And this is a point I've made on my show, that there are two things that Joe Biden will hurt his campaign. The first will be his son benefiting from, trade deals and, from China and the Ukraine. That's, as I said a couple of nights ago, that ad writes itself. All you got to do is simply say, Joe Biden negotiated these deals that hurt Americans' jobs while his son profited. I mean, that ad writes itself. And if the FBI, in fact, did go rogue, there's no way he can escape that responsibility because supposedly, according to one report on John Solomon at the Hill, he was at a meeting where the Steele dossier was discussed in December of 2016. So, I mean, in effect, you're going to have the guy who's responsible for spying on the administration that spied on another presidency. In other words, what we're seeing now becomes reverse. Instead of Trump in the impeachment table, we'd be looking at, will members of the Obama administration end up in jail or at least penalized? And he would have to defend that. And so would Michelle Obama.
Well, she at least would have a good defense on that. But your point is well taken because people forget who the FBI director was for most of the Obama administration. Yeah. It was Bob Mueller, and then he basically got Comey in there as his kind of protege, and then they turn around and appoint, and then Mueller asks Trump if he can, he wants to have his job back as the director of the FBI, and Trump tells him no, we're going to get somebody else, and then they turn around and a month later they make the special counsel, and who is it? It was Mueller. I mean, come on, it's a very
Well, I'm going to say, because I was one of the few people a couple of years ago on, the Batchelor Pad on our show where I said the Vice Court's violations need to be watched because it's not just, when you have a rogue FBI essentially promoting, lies and misrepresentation of facts to the Vice Court to get awards, or let's say a political a political op research to get awards. Now, this is this is kind of like one of those civil liberty issues where, if it can happen to Trump, it can happen to anybody.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
then you've also got the whole intelligence community too. I was talking to a guy last night, in fact, about who is in part of that group, and he happens to be a Trump. He said, nobody can actually advocate for any particular political party or candidate, but his friends know that he is a Trump supporter, and he said it's almost like they feel sorry for me because I must have had some kind of a mental lapse or something. That he said the bias is so thick that it's just impenetrable. And that's still going on. That's after 2 years of the new president.
The one point I would leave at that is that it's kind of interesting because it's been reported that John Brennan promoted the Steele dossier, and then now he's basically backed off from the fact that he said, no, James Comey promoted it, I just added it. So that will be kind of an interesting aspect. That's the reason why I think that this is going to be the end game for all of this. Okay. All right.
Well, then if they make criminal referrals out of it, and then they start the prosecution, then finally somebody will go to jail for this coup d'etat, attempted coup d'etat. I want to thank Tom for stepping in at the end here, and we would look forward to your comments, and we hope that you'll tune in next week. So we want to thank everybody for your for your patience and for your listening, and we ask that you spread the word and tune in next week to the Dr. Larry Show on the Batchelor Pad Radio Network. Good evening, everyone.